Welcome into the Nashville Game Changers podcast. I'm your host, Jill Jelnick. Nashville has quickly become a hotbed for volleyball over the last several years, and a big reason why all that fun that's been developing over at Lipscomb University, thanks to the head coach of the Bisons, Brandon Rosenthal. Coach Rosenthal joining us today on a very busy week. Coach, thank you so much for dropping in on the podcast.
Happy to be here, and please call me Brandon. Coach is way too formal.
Only because we're sitting on these comfy chairs and the comfy couch. I will call you Brandon.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for coming in. It's funny, we've had coaches and players on the podcast before, but most of the time it's their off season. We're previewing the upcoming season. We haven't had a coach mid-season, not only just mid-season, but getting ready for arguably your most crucial part of the entire year, the ASUN Conference Tournament coming up this week in Florida. The Lipscomb Bisons, 5th seed. You guys play Thursday. Thanks so much for spending the time and coming in, despite having, I'm sure, a lot on your mind right now.
No, I'm happy to be here. And again, some of kind of where I'm at in the career is that you've done this enough. It doesn't make it any less exciting, but you know what's happening. I've got a great staff, and we've got things kind of already planned out. So it's perfect timing, actually.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of you've been there before. This is a program that has made created a standard of being in that ASUN tournament. You've won that 7 tournament titles. You've won the ASUN regular season title 6 times, 8 trips to the NCAA tournament. The list goes on and on. When it comes to this week and preparing for this tournament, what have you learned over your experience are the biggest keys?
I think the understanding that everybody is 0-0. I think that's the hardest part is you have to kind of turn the page on the regular season and understand that everybody has a shot this week. I think how you prepare, we started weeks ago as we started to kind of foresee that we were going to be in the tournament, and a little bit different this year than it has been in, a long time. I think this is probably the latest that we were kind of securing a spot. So, we were holding off on travel plans and things like that, which was a bit unusual and for sure had me antsy. But, I think ultimately, one of the things that we talked about early on in the season was just getting to the tournament and understanding that once you're in the tournament, everybody, with an 8-team tournament, everybody's got to play that first round match. In years past, 1 and 2 got a bye because we had 6 teams. So, but when you go to 8 teams, it's truly, everybody is 0-0 or 0-0. And this year, probably more than any other year in my 20-plus years of coaching, you've got a group of teams that are all decided by or tied, and so it's kind of interesting because I don't know if there's any clear path necessarily, like where one team is going to be like, oh, wow, they're the clear favorites. Now, again, Gulf Coast is playing at home. They're the 1 seed, but they're going up against one of the hottest teams in North Florida. So it's truly going to be a fun tournament.
And that's always what you want in a conference, right? Parity, because at the end of the tournament, you have your automatic bid, your conference tournament winner. And correct me if I'm wrong, the ASUN historically has not been a 2-bid league. But the more parity you have within the regular season, within your schedule, the better you guys look coming out of it, but the better you're prepared for hopefully the NCAA tournament. You made the NCAA tournament in 2020. You mentioned how it's always the goal of the team to get to the ASUN tournament. Do you have conversations about trying to get to the NCAA tournament or one step at a time?
No, we definitely do. I think we go even beyond that. The ASUN tournament is kind of, as you mentioned, the standard, and the last time we didn't get there was in 2005, my second year, or actually 2005 was the first time we got there. 2004 was the last time we hadn't. So it's been a long time. I think for us, that's the expectation, is the ASUN tournament. And, one of the things that we talk about in the recruiting process is we're never going to promise championships, but I'm going to promise the opportunity to play for championships. And so, I think the number of times that we've been in the semifinals or beyond the semifinals at this point is somewhere around 17 or 18 times. So for us, that's the expectations. The NCAA tournament is for sure talked about. And not only that, we're talking about how do we get beyond the first round. We've been 8 times, and we're openly talk about how do we get to the Sweet 16. And again, there's going to be plenty of people out there that talk about how crazy that is. And for me, it's always, my question to them is, why is that crazy? And there's never really been a good answer. And so, years and years ago, we talked about getting to the NCAA tournament, and people said, hey, that's crazy. I said, I thought we could get there within 5 years, and we did. And then, I said, well, let's do it again. And again, people said, hey, that's crazy. And then I came up with this crazy idea of, well, what if we could be in a position to be an at-large team? And, as you mentioned, it's like, well, the ASUN is not typically a 2-bid league. And I was like, right, but what if, and we really kind of delved into the scheduling process and the RPI and kind of figuring out how that works. And we did that. And so for me, by saying, hey, we want to not only get to the NCAA tournament, but we want to go beyond, is just this next evolution. And so it's not crazy to me. I've got the plan that I think, would get us there. And, when we go out and recruit, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for players that aren't afraid to push the envelope. We're looking for players that want to dream bigger than just what is, hey, this is where you belong type of thing.
You're looking for players that hear you talk about your goals and expectations and making that big tournament, and that don't think you're crazy, that are right there with you. Yeah,
I think especially when you talk about the parity and the NIL and the different things that are going on, it doesn't take a whole lot to make that next step. And again, has it been done a lot? No, it hasn't. But, you take a look at our women's soccer team just recently. They won their first round game against Mississippi State. Our men's soccer team has been to the Sweet 16. So, these are things that you just look around. All of a sudden, the barriers start to break down. Our cross-country teams, have competed at the highest level. We've had, individuals compete in track and cross country at the national level. And so to me, it becomes surrounding yourself around people. And we're fortunate with the coaches that we have up and down the hallways of, they don't think, okay, well, hey, this is the only thing you can do. So, it gives me motivation every day to come in and push that envelope for ourselves.
21 straight trips to the ASUN tournament is a pretty high standard to build off of. I would say that sounds crazy, but you've done it over your career with Lipscomb.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. It's expectations. I think when you start to move those expectations higher and higher, and you surround yourself with people that come in and even as freshmen understand those expectations or start to understand those expectations. And for me, it's never been about me. It's not my program. It's the girls' program. And, I don't ever talk about it. I never would say my program. I'm fortunate to be a part of it and to get to make some big decisions, obviously. But also, this is theirs. And so we're trying to but we're trying to kind of captivate an audience of young women that want to take that and run with it.
I've seen you on the sideline, Coach, how animated you are, how passionate you are. You are someone that I would say kind of wears those emotions on your sleeve. And that's not always the case with volleyball coaches, other coaches. I think it's so obvious how much you love the game. And when you say you do this for the girls, no question, anyone that's come to a Lipscomb volleyball game.
Well, I appreciate it. You have to remember, I was a theater major. Okay.
Oh, okay. Theater major.
Some of that is just, I guess, natural.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm somebody that's passionate. I'm somebody that I want to give everything I have every day, and I expect others around me to do the same. And so, Yeah, I'm going to go for it every day.
Stay with us. You're listening to the Nashville Game Changers podcast with Lipscomb University Volleyball head coach Brandon Rosenthal. We'll be right back after this. Coach, facing Central Arkansas, first game of the ASUN Tournament this week. You faced Central Arkansas twice. Dropped the first game, won the most recent matchup, which was beginning of November, beginning of this month. What's the biggest takeaway from those two matches heading into the tournament?
Well, I think, we started the conference season at their place, and it's a really tough place to play. I think it only seats about 190 people. And they do a fantastic job of creating the environment. I didn't think we played particularly well that weekend. And, I remember sitting in that locker room, being 0-1 in conference play and saying to the girls, listen, it's not about how many of these we win. It's about getting to the conference tournament and being in position. So continuing to grow and build on the process. And, we really focused in on that. And it was a bit unusual. I mean, this was a season where we had more losses than we've typically ever had. And, the talent is there with our group. And so I think, kind of going into the second match, there was definitely some payback and revenge that they wanted. And again, we didn't execute kind of late in the first two sets, and we ended up losing, and then coming back and winning it in 5 was an awesome experience. I think, even in the fourth set, we were down 23-20, and it looked bleak, but, we made some, really big plays. And I think that was huge for our girls, to really start to believe and understand. I think for us, the key is going to be, how do we limit our own errors? Our offensive output has been at the top of the ASUN all season. And, when we're playing our best, we're playing clean, we're not making mistakes, or limiting our mistakes. And ultimately, I think that was kind of what we saw in that second, matchup. And so it's been fun. This group is incredible in the sense that we've started to layer things in throughout the season. So there are things that we're going to kind of put out there that other teams haven't seen quite yet, and stuff that we've been working on for weeks. So I'm excited about it.
Special group of seniors this year too.
Yeah, you've got 4 seniors, and 3 of them basically have started their entire 4 years. So to have a group like that where, you've watched them grow, not only on the court but off the court, is pretty special to me. I think that's probably one of those facts that, really kind of goes unnoticed, especially in today's day and age where, kids are transferring as much as they are. I think that this is probably, gosh, I can't even imagine the number. I'm going to guess, maybe the 10th group of, 4 or more seniors at one time. And what I mean by that are girls that have coming through the process or their, their entire career is at Lipscomb. And so, it's special to me to think that you have that many groups of seniors that stay from freshman to senior year.
It speaks to the program. It speaks to you, the environment you've helped create. And to your point, in this day and age, college athletics, I mean, it has evolved so much in the last decade, let alone the last 2 to 3 years. When you look at NIL, when you look at revenue sharing, transfer portal, I think it does speak a lot about what you're doing, that girls want to stay. They want to stay. They want to be a part of that family and continue their career there as opposed to transfer. How has your role evolved the last couple years in terms of trying to re-recruit your players, or maybe adding on a couple more responsibilities that you hadn't had in your previous decade at Lipscomb?
I think the biggest piece is when we started to see this trend of players really looking to explore going other places. I think for me, it became kind of a wake-up call of, all right, hey, what are we doing to invest in our players that are here? And what I mean by that is, are we, spending the time and really, pouring into them as individuals versus just volleyball players or athletes. And we do, I think, a fantastic job, when kids are committed to us, and sometimes they're committed, the summer of their junior year of high school, so leading into their junior year of high school. And I heard Coach K talk about this idea of, the one and dones. And, he was very adamant, we're not going to deal with that. And then all of a sudden he got it beat by a lot of one and done. So he said, all right, we're going to do that. But we're going to invest now as high school juniors and seniors to get to know them, because we're not going to have as much time with them as maybe somebody that's going through, freshman to senior year or freshman to junior year. So, I think for me, it was this, okay, hey, listen, we have to really kind of, instill in them that this is exactly what we said it was going to be. And so, I talked to the recruits, and then obviously when they're, our current players, this idea that it's so much bigger than volleyball. And I know that sounds cliche and it's a coach talk and things like that. But, when you start to pour into them as individuals and start to really get to know them, for who they are, who their family is, what do they want to do, post-graduation. And then I think the biggest piece is, really making those actions happen. And so one of the things that we work hard to do is be involved in our alumni's life. And, we're very fortunate. Nashville is a place where, the girls like to start their professional careers. And I would say a rough number is about 85% of our girls stay and start their professional careers in Nashville. So we have a lot of alumni around, but really starting to take the alumni and connect them with the current players and let them see the opportunities and really kind of get out of the way, and that's kind of that fun piece for me is, allowing the alumni to be a part of the program and really give back. And so, when you go back to your question of, what is kind of the biggest difference, I think for me it's just more time, spending more time with the individuals and allowing them to see who you are as an individual as well. I'm a dad of two, and, our girls are at our house probably once a month. For team dinners and things like that. And so, I think just giving them a place to see me as a father, see me as a husband, I think that that's something that is important. Obviously, as a head coach, your job is to push. And, that's probably one of the things that I think I do very well is continuing to push them as individuals, but also the program forward. And so, you want them to see you in a different light and see who you are as an individual. And so it's been fun to be a part of and really to, take that connection of alumni to current players, but also really that idea of, doing what you say you're going to do. Yeah. And so in the recruiting process, obviously, everybody's talking about how good their program is and things like that. And for me, it's all about actions, and really investing in our girls through the recruiting process and then trying to continue that, through their 4 years.
It also helps when you have such a fun city that you're based in, Nashville, Tennessee. Like you said, a lot of your players end up staying here. When you started coaching at Lipscomb over 20 years ago, was Nashville that much of a selling point then as it is now?
Yes. I mean, again, I didn't coach anywhere else. So for me, it was like, how are we going to sell Lipscomb University? And to me, coming from the West Coast, I was blown away. I moved here in 2000, and I moved from LA. I graduated from Pepperdine University. I worked for Pepperdine for a couple of years and met my wife there. She was in law school. She was originally from Nashville. She's from Goodlettsville area. And so when I moved here, I didn't know anybody. And I was just blown away at the hospitality.
It's different.
The Southern charm. I mean, coming from LA, it was just like it was magical, the green, the lack of traffic. And I know people will, even say, oh, well, 20 years later, now what do you think? It's still nowhere close to the traffic. I mean, you guys have to understand that if traffic is still moving at 35 miles an hour, and it only happens twice a day, it's truly not that bad. So yes, Nashville has always been the selling point for me. I think I truly believe, having traveled now extensively for 25 years, I think it's still the best city in the country. And I mean that when I talk about, obviously cost of living, but way of life and what we have access. I don't know if there's another city that has access to live entertainment like we do. The restaurant scene has exploded over the last, probably even 10 years. I remember when I first moved here in 2000, there wasn't much open past 9:30, which blew me away because coming from LA, we typically made reservations for 9 o'clock, and people here were like, what? That's crazy. So all in all, I think Nashville is just this, even through some of the challenging times that we're going through with the growth and development and things like that, I still find it so refreshing, what kind of city it represents.
Every aspect of Nashville seems to have just exploded. To your point, looking at volleyball specifically, how have you seen the sport grow in this city over your time here?
It's still this giant in waiting, and what I mean by that, the sport of volleyball across the country, and women's volleyball has just exploded. Probably 7-8 years ago now, it overtook women's basketball as the number one sport for high school age females. And what I think here, I have seen it. When I first moved here, there was one volleyball club. It was called Impact, and then there was two volleyball clubs. There was Impact, and then Williamson Select. And then I threw my hat in the ring, and we started a club program. So there was 3, and then there was 2. So yeah, I mean, it's been awesome to see. I mean, and not only that, I think what you've seen is the talent in this city has been incredible. So now I think there's 5 or 6 different clubs in a city that probably can still grow even more. When you take the Murfreesboro area and you talk about North Nashville, I mean, it's incredible. Unfortunately, I don't know if there's enough coaches, and so that's what I think is a beautiful thing is you've got all these talented players now, at 3 universities right here in Lipscomb, Belmont, and Vanderbilt, and then you kind of branch out to Fisk and TSU and Trevecca, and then you branch out even further into Austin P, MTSU. It's really going to explode over the next, I would say, even 5 to 10 years, because what's happening are these young adults that played volleyball are now getting into coaching, and they're doing a fantastic job. So I think as the coaching pool grows, so will the club scene here in Nashville, because I think that's kind of been that piece that's been lacking. Not that there aren't good coaches. I just don't think that there's enough good coaches that can, really kind of handle just a pure volume.
Yeah. And I know there are good coaches here because you're good friends with 2 of the other coaches at Vanderbilt with Anders Nelson, and then also at Belmont with Fritz Rosenberg. Small volleyball world that all you guys were friends before, or was it always inevitable that you'd end up here in the Music City?
No, it's wild to think about. Anders and I have become friends. Craig Skinner, who's the head coach at Kentucky, and I are dear friends, and we talk daily. It's kind of funny because obviously, everybody thinks the collegiate scene is so big, but it's actually the opposite. It's really kind of close circles. And so as we and volleyball is interesting, or collegiate volleyball is interesting, especially on the women's side, because there's so much collaboration, especially over the summers. There's these college coaches camps that we all do. We obviously all recruit in the same cities. So there's quite a bit of time that we spend with each other, whether it's dinner, whether it's just kind of sharing back and forth with each other. So it's weird because from July till December, we don't really see each other a ton. We all communicate via text and calls and things like that. And then January through June, we see each other every weekend. In recruiting. So it's kind of this weird relationship where it is much smaller than people think. And there's good and bad. I mean, the amount of information that we share with each other is quite a bit. I would say that, of the different sports out there, there's probably a lot of information shared in volleyball as far as recruiting and trying to help each other out. But, you also have to find that kind of, you don't want to share too much. Now that we're competitors, you can't share everything.
Yes, you want to beat them, but then when the season's over, we can have dinner, we can talk.
100%,
Yes.
100%.
You're listening to the Nashville Game Changers podcast with Lipscomb University head volleyball coach Brandon Rosenthal. We'll be right back after this. Brandon, obviously your focus is on the ASUN tournament this week. First game against Central Arkansas. However, if you were to take a step back for a second, look back on the 20 plus years you've been with Lipscomb, what you've been able to achieve with the Bisons is nothing short of remarkable. 400 wins, all at the same university, reached that milestone last year. 8 trips the NCAA tournament, seven tournament titles, 6 regular season titles. The list goes on and on. As you one day look back at the legacy of success you've built at Lipscomb University, what will you be most proud of?
The relationships. I mean, it's easy for me. It's always been about that. The number of wins is awesome. I'm a very competitive individual, and I want to win every match. But it's funny, recently there's this number that I think Leighton, our sports information director, kind of dug up as far as number of wins in Tennessee, and it's been fun to kind of, I guess, chase that, if you will. I didn't have any clue that it was a real number, but my dad loved the idea of it, and some of the other people did. But for me, I think it's more the opportunity. I think this year we opened up our home schedule, or our schedule versus Nebraska at home, and to see Allen Arena packed, 4,500 fans, and again, what people deemed was possible. It was awesome to kind of walk out and see that and feel that energy. And again, we were very fortunate that Nebraska wanted to come and play us. It doesn't happen. I was explaining to my 17-year-old son, Jack, just the other day, I just said, just imagine if Kentucky basketball or Duke basketball wanted to come and play at Lipscomb. That's how big, having Nebraska. But for me, we had an alumni weekend, and that was what was so special to me. We had an event Friday night before the match, but then we had an event at my house Saturday evening, and that was incredible. To see, what started as a small group. I think we had 125, whether it was alumni or their family at my house. And, it was awesome because so much is revolved around our house, whether it's the recruiting process or their time there, to have everybody at the house just sitting around enjoying, eating, talking, laughing. I mean, it was just to hear the sounds and hear the stories. I mean, they're like, to me, it's hilarious, to hear these stories that have evolved and grown in lore. They'll be like, hey, do you remember? And I'm like, no, I don't. And they think I'm lying, but I truly don't. What's wild to me, to see 23 years, I forget who goes with who. I know roughly about, who played with who, but when you get a group together like that, you forget, okay, she was a senior when she was a freshman. So what was wild to me was seeing, some of our girls from the very first team in 2003, hanging out with girls that just graduated last year, and them meeting for the first time, so that was, and always has been, what's special to me is the relationship. I work feverishly to stay in contact with our alumni. And, I would say on any given day, text is my kind of main mode of communication. I would say on a given day, there are probably 70 to 75 different text chains that I'm a part of. And a lot of it is checking in with our alumni. It's something that I make a priority. I would say every day you're probably talking to 5 to 10 different alumni. How are they doing? You have big accomplishments. We had 2 that just went into the Lipscomb Hall of Fame. You have weddings, you have babies, you have job promotions, but also you have tough stuff too. And what I've always prided myself on was being there for our girls, and well beyond, their time at Lipscomb. So yeah, the relationship's everything to me.
Do you have a memory or two that stands out more than most? I know 23 years is a lot to draw from, but is there one or two that sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a part of a couple of weddings where I was asked to be the officiant, and
for your former players.
Yeah.
Wow, so, at least 2.
Yes.
Wow,
yeah.
that's a pretty big deal.
I've got one coming up in March.
Your third one.
Yes.
You're going to officiate your third wedding for a former player. That's got to be pretty special.
It is. The first one is Alex Kelly Samuels, who owns Rustler Hat Co. here in town.
Oh, wow. That's a great brand.
Yeah. And so it was down in kind of the 30A area, and I was so nervous. My wife went with me, and I was preparing, and we had probably 4 or 5 hours before the wedding, and she said, do you want to go on a bike ride? I was like, no, I don't want to go on a bike ride. I am so nervous. And I've done this before, I've given thousands of speeches, and I was a theater major and, things like that. But I was so nervous because I realized the enormity of it, and it was terrifying. But it all came off, and I was really proud of it. And it was in the middle of season, so I literally next morning,
middle of season too.
Yeah, it just happened to be where we had a day off in between, or a couple days off, and so I hopped on a plane the next day and got back to the team. But yeah, I mean, that's special. Obviously, I think another part that's special is when our former players have girls come back, be a part of our camps, come to the matches. That's pretty wild to me to think about. Is like, okay, I coached her mom, and now I'm coaching the daughter in some form or fashion, whether it's camp on campus or camps off campus. So that's and I think just being a part of weddings in general is pretty special. We have a tradition where anytime one of our alumni have a child, it is the number one priority in my life that day to make sure that we have these Lippy onesies or Lipscomb Volleyball onesies that we get out. I want that to be, and I write a card to the child. So I address it to the child, and I want that to be their very first piece of mail they ever receive. And so, all that's going on, I'll stop everything when I hear that and make sure that gets in the mail, because that's a tradition that I think is incredible and something that I'm really proud of.
Special full circle for you.
Yeah, it really is, and it's wild to think that there's times that just because of the mail system, I'm able to get in the mail, and it's there before they get home.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so it's
pretty good.
Again, if you ask the assistants or anybody around the office, when I hear of one of our former players, where they've delivered their child, like everything stops. I've got to do that right then and there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I bet that means a lot. Before we let you go, Brandon, let's hear your latest opinion for our In My Opinion segment. Anything, free range, whatever's been on your mind. Doesn't necessarily have to be the ASUN Tournament, specifically your first game against Central Arkansas. What else have you has been on your mind lately?
I think it's just kind of growth and development of young people. I have a daughter who's now a sophomore, second year at University of Virginia, and some of the things that I get to see and witness and be a part of, whether it's on the coaching side or the dad side, is just encouraging our gosh, I'm going to sound like Unc right here, but our young people to continue to learn. It's so awesome to see, what is available at their disposal. So whether it's AI or just social media, it's awesome to see how much they can grow and learn from. I recently was talking with our team about Maggie Rogers, who's a singer-performer, and, just her story where she gets to meet Pharrell in a NYU class, and Pharrell hears her song, and then she goes on to stardom. But she recently spoke at NYU this past spring at their commencement speech, and just to hear that commencement speech, and again, kind of that full circle moment. So that to me is awesome, is to hear, and I'm always trying to grow and learn myself, whether it's language, that everybody's using today, and the different slang and things that, or the TikTok dances. Yeah,
the whole 6'7" thing. As soon as you said that, I don't understand what that is. Yeah. I don't even want to understand what that is, but I guess the kids are obsessed with it.
They are. I think that's what's awesome right now. If you watch all these college basketball games, and they have these games where these kids are there. And
which is great, right? And that's nothing new. Like, schools or teams of young kids coming to basketball games, but then they go crazy when the score.
It's amazing.
It's
amazing. So I think for me, I'm passionate about our younger generation getting past the first 2 or 3 lines of Wikipedia. I want them to kind of dive into things, and whatever their passions are, I want them to share that. And to go deeper. I think so much is so surface level anymore. And same thing with relationships. I think it's it's so easy to be quick and one of the rules, we don't have many rules, but one of the rules we do have at Lipscomb Volleyball is there are no phones at meals. Because I love looking down the table and hearing and seeing the back and forth of, I guess, real conversations and diving into more about who that person is and what they're all about. And so to me, I'm passionate about that. In my opinion, I want our youth to go deeper into what those relationships are, and not only relationships, but also learning what it's all about to be good people. I think there's so much negativity going on that I don't think it's too hard or too much to expect to just be good. Good people.
Yeah. That was great. That's a pretty good opinion. I like that one. That was pretty good. Coach, thank you so much. Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time out of your ASUN tournament week to come and highlight an incredible program. I love everything you're doing with the alumni. I don't think I've ever heard a coach talk so much about how much he prioritizes and cares and is passionate about the players when they move on. I loved hearing that and your stories. And of course, good luck this week.
Thank you.
I think whatever happens this week, we're going to be cheering for you. Go Bisons. But no doubt what you've been able to create at Lipscomb is nothing short of remarkable. And the people that thought you were crazy once upon a time ago for those goals and having the dreams of making the NCAA tournament, I love that you've proved them wrong every step of the way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm very fortunate to be in a position where somebody gave me an opportunity and allowed me to kind of dream bigger than, what people thought was possible. So for me, it's always about those that came before me and continue to, pour into me and to what we're trying to do. So thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Go Bisons, right?
Thank you.
Let's go. Thanks so much for listening to the Nashville Game Changers podcast. Hope you enjoyed our episode. We won't have a new episode next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday, so please be safe. Enjoy your holiday. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you the following week for our next episode.